Hey, fourth graders. So we are going to continue our book, Number the Stars. But before I continue with chapter five, let's think about chapter four. So in chapter four, Ellen was talking to the girls about her Jewish New Year. We call it Rosh Hashanah, as we know. And her mother had bought a chicken so they could celebrate their New Year. And then later, we find out that Ellen is going to be staying with them, which to Anne Marie was weird because she knew that with Rosh Hashanah, everyone celebrates at home. So she had an idea that something was just not right. So Ellen shows up at the Johansons, and of course, Mrs. Rosen sent the chicken that she had bought to cook for the Jewish New Year along with her. And, you know, so where'd they go? Well, they had to escape because we know from chapter four, the Nazis had gotten the list of all the people who went to the synagogue, meaning they're Jewish. So Ellen's parents had to escape. And Ellen is going to stay at the Johansons and pretend that she's Anne Marie's sister. So, what are you thinking about this? And you know, I asked you earlier if you would be brave enough to do something like this. So, do you think that this arrangement is a good idea? Do you think is it going to work? Do you think that Ellen will ever see her parents again? Those are all questions you should be asking yourselves after reading and listening to chapter four. So, reading historical fiction, it does take patience and skill, and you must also be a detective looking for clues. So, I asked you what evidence you found in chapter 4, which lets you know that the story Number the Stars took place a long time ago. Some of you said paper dolls, some of you were talking about Kirsty's fish skin shoes, the black ink, oh, and of course, Nazis, you don't see them around anymore. And then they had to change into their nightgowns. I think now we all wear pajamas. So let's now start with chapter five, Read Like a Detective of Historical Fiction. Who is that? Who is the dark haired one? I wonder who they're talking about. Do you really think anyone will come? Ellen asked nervously, turning to Anne Marie in the bedroom. Your father doesn't think so. Of course not. They're always threatening stuff, just like to scare people. Anne Marie took her nightgown from the hook in the closet. Anyway, if they did, it would give me a chance to practice acting. I just pretend to be Lise. I wish I were taller, though. Ellen stood on tiptoe, tried to make herself tall. She laughed at herself, and her voice was more relaxed. You were great as the Dark Queen in the school play last year, Anne Marie told her. You should be an actress when you grow up. My father wants me to be a teacher. He wants everyone to be a teacher like him. But maybe I could convince him that I should go into acting school. Ellen stood on her tiptoe again and made an imperious gesture with her arm. I am the Dark Queen, she intoned dramatically. I have come to command the night. You should try saying, I'm Lise Johansson, Anne Marie said, grinning. If you told the Nazis that you were the Dark Queen, they'd haul you off to a mental institution. Ellen dropped her actress pose and sat down with her legs curled under her on the bed. They won't really come here, do you think? She asked again. Anne Marie shook her head. Not in a million years. She picked up her hairbrush. The girls found themselves whispering as they got ready for bed. There was no need, really, to whisper. They were, after all, supposed to be normal sisters, and Papa had said they could giggle and talk. The bedroom door was closed. But that night did seem somehow different from a normal night. And so they whispered, How did your sister die, Anne Marie? Ah, we've been waiting for this. Ellen asked suddenly. I remember when it happened, and I remember the funeral. It was the only time I had ever been into a Lutheran church, but I never knew just what happened. I don't know exactly, Anne Marie confessed. She and Peter were out somewhere together, and then there was a telephone call that there had been an accident. Mom and Papa rushed to the hospital. Remember, your mother came and stayed with me and Kirsty. Kirsty was already asleep and she slept right through everything. She was so little then. But I stayed up and I was with your mother in the living room when my parents came in came home in the middle of the night and they told me Lise had died. I remember it was raining, Ellen said softly. It was still raining the next morning when Mama told me. Mama was crying and the rain made it seem as if the whole world was crying. Anne Marie finished brushing her long hair and handed her hairbrush to her best friend. Ellen undid her braids, lifting her dark hair away from the thin gold chain she wore around her neck, the chain that held the Star of David, and began to brush her thick curls. I think it was partly because of the rain. They said she was hit by a car. I suppose the streets were slippery and it was getting dark, and maybe the driver just couldn't see. Anne Marie went on, remembering. Papa looked so angry. He made one hand into a fist and kept pounding it on the other. I remember the noise of it. Slam, slam, slam. Together they got into a wide bed and pulled up the covers. Anne Marie blew out the candle and drew the dark curtains aside so the open window near the bed let in some air. See that blue trunk in the corner? She said, pointing through the darkness. Lots of Lee's things are in there. Even her wedding dress. Mom and Papa never looked at those things, not since the day they packed them away. Ellen sighed. She would have looked so beautiful in her wedding dress. She had such a pretty smile, and I used to pretend that she was my sister too. She would have liked that, Anne Marie told her. She loved you. That's the worst thing in the world, Ellen whispered, to be dead so young. I would I wouldn't want the Germans to take my family away, to make us live someplace else. But still, it wouldn't be as bad as being dead. Anne Marie leaned over and hugged her. They won't take you away, she said. Not your parents either. Papa promised that they were safe, and he always kept his promises. And you are quite safe here with us. For a while they continued to murmur in the dark, but the murmurs were interrupted by yawns. Then Ellen's voice stopped. She turned over, and in a minute her breathing was quiet and slow. Anne Marie stared at the window where the sky was outlined and a tree branch moved slightly in the breeze. Everything seemed very familiar, very comforting. Dangers were no more than odd imaginings like ghost stories that children made up to frighten one another, things that couldn't possibly happen. Anne Marie felt completely safe here in her own home, with her parents in the next room and her best friend asleep beside her. She yawned contentedly and closed her eyes. It was hours later, but still dark, when she was awakened abruptly by the pounding on the apartment door. Boom, boom, boom. Ellen eased the bedroom door open quietly, only a crack, and peeked out. Behind her, Ellen was sitting up, her eyes wide. She could see Mom and Papa in their nightclothes moving about. Mama held a lighted candle. But as Anne Marie watched, she went to a lamp and switched it on. It was so long a time since they had dared to use the strictly rationed electricity after dark that the light in the room seemed startling to Anne Marie watching through the slightly open bedroom door. She saw her mother look automatically to the blackout curtains, making certain that they were tightly drawn. Papa opened the front door to the soldiers. This is the Johansson's apartment? A deep voice asked the question loudly, in a terrible accent to Danish. Our name is on the door, and I see you have a flashlight. Papa answered. What do you want? Is something wrong? I understand you are a friend of your neighbors, the Rosens, Miss Johansson, the soldier said angrily. Sophie Rosen is my friend, that is true, Mamma said quietly. Please, could you speak more softly? My children are asleep. Then you will be so kind to tell me where the Rosens are. He made no effort to lower his voice. I assume they are at home sleeping. It is 4 in the morning after all, Mamma said. Anne Marie heard the soldier stalk around the living room toward the kitchen. From the hiding place, from her hiding place in the narrow sliver of an open doorway, she could see the heavy uniformed man, a holstered pistol at his waist, in the entrance of the kitchen, peering in toward the sink. Another German voice said, The Rosens' apartment is empty. We are wondering if they might be visiting their good friends, the Johansons. Well, said Papa, moving slightly so that he was standing in front of Anne Marie's bedroom door, and she could see nothing except the dark blur of his back. As you could see, you are mistaken. There is no one here but my family. You will not object if we look around. The voice was harsh, and it was not a question. It seems we have no choice, Papa replied. Please don't wake my children, Mamma requested again. There is no need to frighten little ones. The heavy booted feet moved across the floor again and into the other room. A closet door opened and closed with a bang. Anne Marie eased her bedroom door closed silently. She stumbled through the darkness to the bed. Ellen, she whispered urgently, take your necklace off. Ellen's hands flew to her neck. Desperately, she began trying to unhook the tiny clasp. Outside the bedroom door, the harsh voices and heavy footsteps continued. I can't get it open, Ellen said frantically. I've never taken it off. I can't even remember how to open it. Anne Marie heard a voice just outside the door. What is here? Shh, her mother replied. My daughter's bedroom. They are sound asleep. Hold still, Anne Marie commanded. This will hurt. She grabbed the little gold chain, yanked with all her strength, and broke it. As the door opened and light flooded into the bedroom, she crumpled it in her hand and closed her fingers tightly. Terrified, both girls looked up at the 3 Nazi officers who entered the room. One of the men aimed a flashlight around the bedroom. He went to the closet and looked inside. Then, with a sweep of his gloved hand, he pushed to the floor several coats and bathrobes that hung from the pegs on the wall. There was nothing else in the room except a chest of drawers, the blue decorated trunk in the corner, and a heap of Kirsty's dolls piled in a small rocking chair. The flashlight beam touched each thing in turn. Angrily, the officer turned toward the bed. Get up, he ordered. Come out here. Trembling, the 2 girls rose from the bed and followed him, brushing past the 2 remaining officers in the doorway to the living room. Anne Marie looked around. The 3 uniformed men were different from the ones on the street corners. The street soldiers were often young, sometimes ill at ease, and Anne Marie remembered how the giraffe had, for a moment, let his harsh pose slip and had smiled at Kirsty. But these men were older, and their faces were set with anger. Her parents were standing beside each other, their faces tense, but Kirsty was nowhere in sight. Thank goodness that Kirsty slept through almost everything. If they had wakened her, she would be wailing, or worse, she would be angry and her fists would fly. Your names? The officer barked. Anne Marie Johansson, and this is my sister. Quiet! Let her speak for herself. Your name? He was glaring at Ellen. Ellen swallowed. Lise, she said, cleared her throat. Lise Johansson. The officer stared at them grimly. Now, Mamma said in a strong voice, you have seen that we are not hiding anything. May my children go back to bed. The officer ignored her. Suddenly, he grabbed a handful of Ellen's hair. Ellen winced. He laughed scornfully. You are a blonde child sleeping in the other room. You have a blonde child sleeping in the other room. And you have this blonde daughter, he gestured to Anne Marie with his head. Where did you get the dark haired one? He twisted the lock of Ellen's hair. from a different father, from the milkman? Papa stepped forward. Don't speak of my wife in such a way. Let go of my daughter. I will report you for such treatment. Or maybe you got her from someplace else. The officer continued with a sneer. From the Rosens? For a moment, no one spoke. Then Anne Marie, watching in panic, saw her father move swiftly to the small bookcase and take out a book. She saw that he was holding a family photograph album. Very quickly, he searched through the pages, found what he was looking for, and tore out 3 pictures from 3 separate pages. He handed them to the German soldier officer who released Ellen's hair. You will see each of my daughters, each with her name written on the photograph, Papa said. Anne Marie knew instantly which photographs he had chosen. The album had so many snapshots, all the poorly focused pictures of school events and birthdays, but it also contained a portrait taken by a photographer of each girl as a tiny infant. Mama had written in her delicate handwriting the name of each baby daughter across the bottom of the photographs. She realized, too, with an icy feeling, why Papa had torn them from the book. At the bottom of each page, below the photograph itself, was written the date. And the real Lisa Hansen had been born 21 years earlier. Kirsten Elizabeth, the officer read, looking at Kirsty's baby picture. He let the photograph fall to the floor. Anne Marie, he read next, glanced at her and dropped the second photograph. Lise Margaret, he read finally, and stared at Ellen for a long, unwavering moment. In her mind, Anne Marie pictured the photograph that he held, the baby, wide eyed, propped up against the pillow, her tiny hands holding a silver teething ring, her bare feet visible below the hem of an embroidered dress, the wispy curls, dark. The officer tore the photograph in half and dropped the pieces on the floor. Then he turned, the heels of his shining boots grinding into the pictures, and left the apartment. Without a word, the other 2 officers followed. Papa stepped forward and closed the door behind them. Anne Marie relaxed, clenched fingers. Anne Marie relaxed the clenched fingers of her right hand, which still clutched Ellen's necklace. She looked down and saw that she had imprinted the Star of David into her arm, into her palm. That right there, imprint Star of David in her palm, that's evidence of how tightly she was holding that necklace, so tightly that when she opened it, she saw the star right there. Now, if that evidence isn't of fear or love for her friend, Ellen, I don't know what is. So you will now take the quiz on Google Form, and hopefully you have reached an exciting chapter of Number the Stars. All right, see you guys later.